Hi guys, Togri here with a new video, and this is like an emergency tier list for 10.1.5 because I made a prediction tier list and I felt like I wanted to correct a few things. I've played multiple classes since the beginning of 10.1.5, played against versus like multiple classes in 2s and 3s or even in RPGs, but mostly in solo shuffle. This tier list weighs more out of solo shuffle than 3s or 2s. What you're seeing is the prediction I had before we started 10.1.5. It was a prediction, and now I'm going to make a few adjustments and I'm going to talk about those adjustments. But let's talk about the things where I was correct. The placement of Holy Paladin is S+, and it will stay S+. It is great in solo shuffle because of the immunities, because of the spread healing, and it is not like reduced by the people that you're healing, so it's actually very good spread healing. And they have multiple ways to actually deal damage, which is significant, but also to out heal most healers with tier deliverance, for example. Often top 2 or top 3, while it is a 1.5 minute CD, which is crazy. Like imagine if revival was like top 2 healing for Mistweavers, for example. This is actually quite insane. It improves also all the healing that you're doing. Made a Holy Paladin PvP guide if you want to check that out. Again, I think it's one of the best healers you can play if you are coming from a DPS perspective. Augmentation evoker, like predicted, it is a S+ spec. I think it's like a patch defining spec. It is really strong. It is basically a thing that needs to be nerfed, or to have a separate category, like for example Prot Paladin, that if you're playing Augmentation Evoker, you face other Augmentation Evoker, and that's how I feel very strongly about. It should take the place of a healer in solo shuffle, at least. In 3s, I get that Augmentation can have some synergies, but it literally is playing like a Preservation Evoker with a Devastation Evoker kind of feeling, and it does more damage. Like Upheaval critted me for 250k, which is quite insane for a support class. Just imagine like I don't know, man, Shadow Priest from Shadowlands actually critting you for 250k, just unimaginable. So it's very strong. I want to change the placements of the healers first, because I feel like things are a bit harder for them in solo shuffle, especially if they're facing like a Holy Paladin. So if we're talking about healers, I want to talk about Disc Priest. I think Disc Priest is still strong, but it is getting outshined by Paladins, and they have also like immunities, which is better than a damage reduction, for example, with like BOP. Again, it's highly dependent if you're facing casters. If you're facing casters, again, a BOP will do nothing. But I do truly believe that this Discipline Priest is still around the A tier, but it gets outshined pretty hard. So for me, it's going to be B tier. And what I'm going to do, basically, because this is like this is actually a threshold. If you're actually very good compared to a Disc Priest, you're going to be higher. If you're going to be worse than Disc Priest, you're going to be lower. And I do think Restoration Shaman is actually very worse than a Disc Priest. It's going to drop to C tier. They have some damage, I guess, and their healing is quite good, but a Holy Paladin basically just only needs to do a Daybreak and then a Holy Shock on a healing tide totem, for example, and that totem is gone. So it is pretty significant how worse Restoration Shaman is compared to a Holy Paladin. I think the disadvantage of having totems where people have to stay still inside of them makes it also very hard to actually have any significant, I would say, value compared to the other healers. I do think in 3s and 2s they can have better comps, which can set them apart from a Holy Paladin, for example. But I do think that a lot of comps that you are featuring a Resto Shaman could feature a Holy Paladin pretty easily. For example, if you're playing like a Assassination Rogue with a Shadow Priest, you could perfectly play a Holy Paladin and it wouldn't be bad. And you could also just play multiple cast cleaves with a Holy Paladin instead of a Restoration Shaman because of how Holy Paladins actually are playing today. I think it's very strong. Then you have like Restoration Druid, which I think they kind of do good versus a Holy Paladin because they have Cyclone. If someone is bopped, what they could do easily is actually put a Cyclone on the bopped target. Now they have to be reacting very fast and also be able to put a Cyclone like easily without having your DPSers die. But I think they do fare a bit better than Disc Priest, and that's my current opinion about it. We have also Preservation Evoker, which again, I think the issue is they are kind of outshined by Augmentation Evokers, and that's the thing. They made a third spec, which is like obviously a better version than the two other specs, so they put more work into it. And I'm actually a bit sad for them. They could like literally split the Augmentation Evoker toolkit and give it to Preservation and give it to Devastation, and it would feel more complete. But right now we have like a third spec, which is obviously a bit overloaded compared to the other two specs. But I do think in a vacuum, if you are like not thinking about Augmentation Evoker, they are still something that they can work with. They just fare very badly versus Holy Paladin. And you will see that, to be honest, the problem is Holy Paladin being too strong compared to the other healers instead of having the other healers being too bad compared to a Holy Paladin. I think just in general, you want to buff those like healers to the standard of a Holy Paladin, but it is very hard. And one spec that actually suffers the most out of it is probably Mistweaver. I think Mistweaver is somewhat efficient in their healing, but they're losing in the mana game. They're losing actually with throughput as well. They have one thing in RBGs, they're very strong, but like I said, the tier list will be more based about soul shuffle. I will make a separate tier list for 2s and 3s in RBGs, but this is like an emergency one. I wanted to make it because I feel like the prediction I made is not too far from the reality, although there are very big outliers. I'm going to discuss about that. I do feel like Mistweavers are going to be on the same level as Restoration Druids, Preservation Evokers, and Mistweavers in general, like themselves. Holy Priest is like something that people kind of debate with me, and they say that they are not that good at the moment, and yes, they lack a damage reduction ability that can save their teammates. I do feel like the throughput is fantastic, especially versus like cleaves with Prey of Mending. And yes, if you have like you face versus like single target pressure, like for example, sub rogue with a I don't know, man, a frost mage. Yes, it is hard to actually have a lot of proc of Prey of Mending, which in turn will have a lot less value. I think the problem is Holy Paladin is so good compared to the other heals that I have to drop it to A tier, but I think that is quite fair, and I think I'm going to drop Mistweavers into B tier. Because I'm thinking that they are probably the biggest losers versus a Holy Paladin, because they cannot really contribute in damage proportions, and if they are fist weaving, a pop is even worse for them than, let's say, a caster Mistweaver. So for me, it's going to be B tier, and that is pretty much for the healers. Okay, I'm going to put the healers in the front, so we are like done with that, and we're going to go and correct the other specs. I want to talk first and foremost about the ranged DPSs, so we can have like some sort of I would say line where we're going to discuss a few things. Let's discuss about mages first. I think Fire Mage, I overshot it a bit too hard. I think the problem is with this current meta, playing Glass Cannon gives you more damage on Ignite, gives you more damage on Fireball, gives you more damage on the important things. I think Scorch is just not that good to actually be spammed, so that's a non-factor. The issue is they're losing a lot of HP because of that, and the current meta makes it that it's pretty impossible to survive. For a mage, even a good one is still going to be pretty hard to survive on as a fire mage. Yes, you can play a bit annoying and play a bit of cat and mouse, and I do think if they buff the survivability just a bit, they could be better. But I think like right now, to just free cast, it is a bit more annoying. Also, they kind of nerfed PvP modifiers a bit too harsh, because they were like a bit scared of the new talents and the new playstyles that were available to Fire Mage. But I don't know. I am not like as I would say dramatic as Venruki is saying that it's a complete C tier, but I do feel like they are dropping to the B tier-ish specialization. So I'm going to put it in the front so we can actually talk a little bit easier in clarifying the specs. I do think Balanced Druid are going to jump into S+. I think the damage for Full Moon is too strong, so it actually makes you have to target the Balanced Druid, but with the current state, it is actually very hard to have all the attention to the Balanced Druid, because I think Precog is just too strong and interrupting is too bad with a Holy Paladin, because it reduces 30% of the interrupts time. So even if you interrupt the full moon, you will not be interrupting the second cast of his full moon. So it's actually very hard to deal with. I do feel like a Demonology Warlock is still strong, but I'm going to drop it in A tier. They have to cost a lot more, and I do feel with the meta, Holy Paladin is, again, like Bop is working versus like demons. So if you're bopping when they're going, you can actually survive a lot of the damage that a Demonology Warlock can actually produce. They have to cost way more, so it means that their talents are a bit less efficient, because they will lose more time to actually have a lot of pets. They do have more damage on imps, do more damage with their main pet, but I think just in general it's going to drop. It's not bad. A tier is really not bad. It means that this is meta, but the S tiers are going to be reserved for the S tiers, which is Shadow Priest is going to stay S tier for a long while. I think the utility, the CC, and the being able to actually multi-spell the Holy Paladin, their like Bobs, or just in general their bubble, makes it up for a lot of things, and they can actually go through with a lot of the damage that they can produce. One thing is they can actually dispel, like Holy Paladins can dispel all the VTs very easily with just one talent, so that has to be nerfed somehow, some way. But for now, I'm going to stay it with S tier, because I think the synergies with other classes are going to bear it, like they're going to be efficient to actually have a great S tier. You will see that I'm actually very critic with the S tiers. I think I cannot put like 12 classes in S tiers, because specs, because then they lose the meaning of S tier. I think S tier you have to have gradation. That's why I have S+, S, and A, or else I would have like A, B, C, D from the start. So anyways, let's talk about the Destruction Warlock. I think Destruction Warlock is still going to be staying A tier with Frost Mage. Frost Mage, they are still efficient and very strong, but they can be stopped, and it's very hard to actually just dive from a Frost Mage. They have a combination where they will be very hard to actually deal with, but like a solo spec, I don't think it's like the most best thing out there. Elemental Shaman, I think it's also staying at A tier. I think it's still good. And I want to talk about like Affliction Warlock. I think Affliction Warlock is going to drop into C tier. Holy Paladin can heal pretty efficiently the pad damage from Affliction Warlock, and it is feeling very somber for Affliction Warlocks. I think Devastation's work is going to be D tier, because it is it is non-existent compared to an Augmentation Evoker. Like if you're playing Devastation Evoker, why are you not playing Augmentation Evoker? It's pretty much like an upgrade. It is really sad, because it is what it is, but they kind of like shoot up Devastation, and they will need to rework the whole spec. I don't care about PvE feeling better. I think in PvP it just feels so worse that it needs a rework. Now, that is pretty much the ranged DPS tier. I do rate BM Hunter and MM Hunter still very high, because they have tools to actually like survive a bit of damage, but also do and deal a lot of damage from afar. And BM Hunter is still going to be something that is always going to be performing, because it exists as its current form. Now let's talk about melees. I think the melees have a lot of work. Yes, I didn't change the placements of arcane. I think arcane and fire mage, they kind of resemble together on how they deal damage. I think arcane mage, you can make it work as an A tier, maybe, but I think B tier is a fair shot, because again it's a one cast, I like a one school cast type of ranged. So There it is. The melees, there is a few big changes. Let's talk about the elephant in the room. Unholy Decay is very strong. I'm going to add another row, and that's especially for Unholy Decays. I don't think it's like S tier, because one thing is, if you want to be S tier, at least make yourself unkillable, and Unholy Decay is not unkillable. It is killable by melees. Yes, you fare very well into the meta. I played a bit of Unholy Decay. It is actually doing a lot of damage, a lot more than on the PTR, because again, on a dummy, for some reason, the PvP modifiers are not that correct. But wounds plus your Clawing Shadow actually does a lot of damage. Like by themselves, it can do just 100k per Clawing Shadow, and also APOC can just like being bursty enough to do 130k, so you can actually like chunk people. So for me, it's going to be A+. They are going to probably sit there alone, but it is mostly because of the meta. Imagine if the meta goes for a melee cleave meta and the casters are gone. I think Unholy Decay are just going to be dropping, but this meta is actually faring themselves very correctly, so that's why I'm going to put it in A+. I tested out, I found it very strong. I found it very strong in particular situations, and yes, there are like gradation, and hopefully you do understand it. It is above the meta, but it's still under the S tiers, and I think S tiers are like... Shadow Priest is very annoying to kill, Subtlety Rogue is very annoying to kill, they have the damage, they have the particularities, they can work. I think Sub Rogue, it's not like something out of the extraordinary to put it in S tier. I think it's something predictable. I think Windwalker do jump into A+ category because they have also the survivability now. They have the damage. I think they like a few things to just put in S tier or S+. But I think the meta kind of favors them a lot. Yes, they do get stopped. Yes, you can kill a Windwalker still, and no, I don't think like it is S tier for the sake of being S tier. I think it's A+, above the meta. It is like growing. They have a lot of cleave damage, which is actually very good in this meta, but Holy Paladins actually are very good into the cleaving damage. They can actually heal the whole group pretty efficiently, so that's why I'm going to put it in A+. I am going to be very dramatic, I know, but I think Arms Warrior are actually B tier. I played a lot of Arms Warrior, the damage is actually subpar. They are actually getting out DPS'd by a lot of people. Yes, they have utility, and no, they do not have the damage to actually kill people by themselves. IMO, at least in arenas. The survivability is also subpar. They are not all that good versus casters anyways, and versus like most of the classes that you see on the screen, they actually are very terrible. A Fury Warrior is a bit better. I don't want to put a P+, I'm going to put like end of the line, because a Fury Warrior, they can still work because of the foresight, because of the damage that they can do and produce, and the self heals and the self peels and the self unrootable abilities. But I do think that the Arms and the Fury Warrior are very, very close to each other, but I want to give like a separation between Fury and Arms because of Fury being able to self-sustain versus the caster, while an Arms Warrior is pretty much like a headless chicken most of the time. Survival Hunter and Outlaw Rogue, I think I'm going to nerf Outlaw Rogue back into the D tier. You don't see them a lot, but whenever you see them, it's actually very disappointed. And whenever they win, they could also win with any other spec. It is purely because of the situations occurring or because of a healer being like 6-0, pretty much. So let's now talk about Enhancement Shaman. I do want to put it a bit higher. I judge them very good because they are actually very strong versus Holy Paladins. Bob is something you can purge, and you have also so much damage that sometimes whenever they're sacking, it is not enough and you can go through. I think it's very strong. Retribution Paladin, I'm going to stick with A tier. The DH, I'm going to stick it with A tier because they do resemble with Fury Warrior, and that will stick like this until they change both of them. Feral Druid, I'm going to downgrade them into the B tier category. I would like to put it in C tier, but I want to still give Feral Druid their due diligence. They do more like AoE damage than an Assassination Rogue, while an Assassination Rogue, once you see a death mark, you just bop most of the time with a Holy Paladin. And yes, I'm talking a lot with the perspective of a Holy Paladin because you see a lot more Holy Paladins these days. And if you're playing Assassination Rogues, chances are you're going to play in a lobby where you see a Holy Paladin or Augmentation Evoker or a Preservation Evoker, for example. And they do all have counters to your Derf mark, so I think that's pretty fair. False Decay, as expected, they are C tier and they're going to stay at C tier. You can climb with it because it's still a bit cheesy and you're one trick pretty much. And yes, in threes you have only like 2 comms to work for pretty much. In twos you're going to suffer, so do not play twos as a False Decay, just go on Holy Decay. And RBGs, you can make it work, but you're a CC bot and a slow bot pretty much. So this is pretty much the A tier. The B tier is correct as well in my opinion. The C tier, Assassination Rogue, Frost Decay, is pretty correct as well. And this is pretty much the tier list. I can understand that some people may be like saying that a lot of specs are feeling better than that, and yes, it is true that specs can feel like S tier sometimes, but I feel like it is normal that it is a pyramid, right? You have most classes and specs into the A tier, which is meta, which is again something every single spec wants to be, and I think you cannot be too top heavy and you cannot be too low heavy, I would say. So that's why it's like a pyramid, you see, like this. And I think it's correct from my understanding and from what I'm actually saying to you guys. Anyways, please let me know what you think about this in the comment section below. You can expect a RBG tier list very soon. I'm playing lots of RBGs with a community that I'm really loving. So shout out to Harry Long, a viewer, a subscriber to me. And he introduced me to the community. And actually a very, very fun community to actually do RBGs with. So I recommend everyone to find a community like this, and I will try to create one for my viewers as well. But again, I'm not like an experienced leader for that. I will make also a 2s tier list. I think 2s is also very fun since Holy Paladin actually is viable. But it's mostly because I play Holy Paladin, I guess. And 3s, I think the comp variety are very good, but I want Augmentation Evokers gone. I think it's too toxic in general in PvP, and I feel like if you're making Augmentation Evoker meta, you should make every single tank spec also meta, because it feels like that. And the same for Protection Paladin. Like if you have Augmentation Evoker actually exists in this current form, why not have Protection Paladins then? That's my question to you guys. But anyways, thank you for watching this video. I really appreciate you. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't done that yet, and we will catch each other very soon in the next video. Have a great day. Bye.